Our panelists are Blue Character, organizer with Citizen Action of New York, campaign manager of Paid Family Leave Campaign, Greg Burla, executive director of Unshackle Upstate, Larry Marks, executive director of the Children's Agenda, Yvette Pagano, CEO of CAR, Engineering and Manufacturing. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished moderator this evening, our longtime league member, dedicated volunteer, Barbara Grosh.
Thank you, Gloria. So let me lay out the format for the evening. We seem to have a very civil panel today, which is good. Somebody might have caught him on Evan Dawson's show at 1 o'clock. And look, they're still civil this afternoon, so that's good. So the format we've agreed on is that Blue Character is going to go first. She's going to give us about a 10-minute introduction to the legislation, where it stands, what the provisions are. And after her, we're going to hear from Greg Barilla from Unshackle Upstate, and he's going to spend about 10 minutes giving us sort of the business view on the issue. And then we're going to get about 5 minutes from Larry and about 5 minutes from Yvette. And they suggested that we do it this kind of short format so that we can then have more of a group conversation. So after the initial, and I'm kind of ruthless as a moderator, so if they run over, I'll like stand up and speak in my chair and say, so that you will have time to ask questions. I'll be moderating the questions, so even though I'll ask you who you want to ask it to, you're gonna come through the chair. Okay, so Blue, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you to AAUW and the League of Women Voters for hosting an important discussion on an issue that is right now being negotiated and discussed in our capital. 1 year ago, January, Governor Cuomo actually responded to a reporter's question with the statement, "The legislature does not have the appetite for paid family leave." 1 year ago. The reaction to that statement by working families and by community healthcare and advocacy organizations across the state was immediate. And right here in Rochester, citizens began to talk about their personal experiences, began to work to collect postcards, to send in emails, to make phone calls, to sponsor educational forums and press events, and this happened in places all over the state. And because of that groundswell of people stepping up and saying, wait a minute, this is something that we need to deal with, we now have a governor who in this January made paid family leave one of the really most emotional, most impactful parts of his State of the State. And he discussed the fact that his father had died a year before, and he valued so much the time he had spent when his father was dying, but felt he hadn't spent enough, but knew that he at least had that choice. And he said, nobody in our state should have to choose between getting a paycheck so they can pay their bills or pay their mortgage and having to spend time in a hospital with a child with cancer, or spend time with their father who was dying, or welcome that new baby into the world. So we need paid family leave. So we've come a long way in a year because of all the work that's being done and all the people who shared their stories. Let's talk a little bit about why we're here in terms of sheer numbers. Women's presence in the labor force has increased dramatically in the last 5 years, from 1960 to the early 70s. The influx of married women workers accounted for almost half the increase in the total labor workforce. Working wives are staying on their jobs longer before starting families. Women make up approximately 47% of the workforce now. And a woman's income is essential to the economic security of her family. According to the National Partnership for Women and Families, 71% of children live in families where all parents work, and women with children are co-breadwinners in 2/3 of families. But while the society has evolved and increasingly accepted and embraced the contributions to women to every aspect of our economy, we still also expect women to be primary family caregivers. And a woman's caregiving responsibilities have been expanding almost as fast as her work responsibilities. We've become a more mobile society, and large percentages of young families no longer live near other relatives who had historically helped to care for children. We're living longer. In 2010, 1 in 7 New Yorkers was 65 or older, but by 2035, it's projected to be nearly 1 in 5. So we have people caring for young children, caring for older people. Our hospitals are learning that people heal better at home. All right, our seniors age better when they're in their home environment. That means somebody needs to be there when people come out of the hospital. They need to set up the caregiving arrangements. They need to help that transition. And we're expecting that somebody will be there. Most often that somebody is a woman. In the workplace, however, we're kind of acting like frogs swimming in a pot of heating water. We're just not recognizing what's going on around us. And we're not looking at the dilemma. Okay, most businesses are still structured around this ideal worker norm, which defines the committed worker as someone who works full-time and full force for 40 years straight. It's a male model. Men are expected to live up to that ideal and therefore shun caregiving because they are afraid of losing respect and pay and advancement opportunity in the workplace if they participate more in caregiving responsibilities. More than 3/4 of new fathers took a leave of a week or less after the birth or adoption of their most recent child. 16% of new fathers didn't take any time off at all. Women, hey, we're still expected to balance this. And the result is we're valued less. We're paid less for exactly the same jobs. And we're too often forced to make an impossible choice between our family's health and our family's economic security. 1/4 of women either quit their jobs or are let go when a new child arrives. Of those who only get partial pay or nothing at all, 1/3 borrow money and 15% go on public assistance, just because of the birth of a new baby. Women in the long run lose lifetime earnings and related Social Security benefits. The good news is, hey, we're waking up, and a younger generation wants to participate in a less discriminatory and more family-friendly work environment. And they're asking for that. And our legislators are finally responding. So the first national efforts for paid family leave came in the form of the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act, which passed Congress after great resistance in 1993. FMLA provides 12 weeks off with job protection for the birth of a child or to care for a seriously ill family member. But FMLA is only available to employees who've worked over 1,250 hours, so no part-time workers qualify. Applies to companies with 50 or more employees. In fact, 40% of U.S. employees are not covered at all by FMLA, and of course, FMLA is unpaid. In the U.S. today, a majority of mothers who work during pregnancy go back in less than the time allotted by FMLA because they can't afford not to. New York State and 4 other states in the country have a temporary disability insurance program. We refer to it as TDI. And a while back, all of those states decided that women could qualify for a disability insurance benefit for pregnancy and childbirth because it was deemed that they were physically unable to work during that time period. So that is our first gesture at maternity benefits. And in New York, as many other states, women are able to qualify for 6 to 8 weeks after the delivery for disability benefits. But New York, unlike the other states, put a cap on the TDI benefit of $179 per week in 1988, and it's never adjusted that upward. So now that benefit is really not much comfort to women whose paycheck is needed to pay the rent. For the last 5 years, the New York Assembly has introduced a paid family leave bill designed to remedy this situation. Their bill proposed 2 major parts. One, increase that traditional TDI benefit so that women recovering from pregnancy can get 2/3 of their income while they're out. And on the other hand, expand that TDI system to include paid family leave for all employees. That is to allow fathers, adoptive parents, other people time off to welcome new babies and take care of seriously ill family members. That bill never really went anywhere until the last couple of years when this groundswell really started to get the Senate interested. So the Assembly now introduced their bill, passed their bill again. Their bill says all employees, regardless of the business size, should get up to 12 weeks of job-protected paid family leave to welcome a new baby or take care of a seriously ill family member. And that wage benefit should be 2/3 of a worker's average weekly wage, beginning immediately. There's a cap on the wage of 2/3 of the average statewide weekly wage. So that means that the cost of the system is kept in check. And if you're a very high earning person, you may not get 2/3 of your income. In January, Governor Cuomo introduced a similar paid family leave insurance program in his budget. In many respects, it is the same as the Assembly. It also allows for up to 12 weeks. It has job protection for those 12 weeks. And it defines family and the benefits in exactly the same way. However, it does not include an increase in traditional TDI, and it says you can't use traditional TDI and paid family leave. So you have to choose one or the other, okay? And when he introduced it originally, he said we would start with a wage benefit of only 35% of a person's wage and progress over 4 years up to 50%. After much discussion, in the amendment period, he increased that. So now his plan starts at 50% of the average weekly wage and goes up to 2/3, at which point it would match what the Assembly is proposing. Okay. Now, the independent Democrats in the Senate put forward what they thought was a good paid family leave, pretty much matches the governor's system, actually has a higher cap on the wage benefit, but everything else there is pretty much the same. So we're coming in with many of the major parties all agreeing on this format. The Senate Republicans have just put out their one-house budget bill, and typically that would give us an idea of what they're looking for. But they included in their one-house budget bill exactly the same language as the governor. So wow, that's great, wonderful. A few days later, they put out their Senate resolution. And the Senate resolution said that we support some form of paid family leave, but only if it provides sufficient protections for business. And we are still waiting to hear what those sufficient protections might be. So we've come a long way. We're poised right now to take our place in the slow but inevitable modernization of the U.S. workforce. And our campaign, our Paid Family Leave Insurance campaign, has supported that Assembly bill since it was first introduced. We're excited to see the legislators understand the necessity, and we do understand there may be some compromises involved. But in the end, we believe rational heads will prevail, that New York will at least establish an employee paid insurance system. Employees pay into, employers do not. That enables all New York workers, men and women, to apply for up to 12 weeks of job-protected paid leave at 2/3 of their average weekly wage to finally take care of our new babies and to care for a seriously ill family member.
Yeah. You ready, Judy? Greg's got a PowerPoint here, which
I thought we had.
No, your head might be in this.
Oh,
You want to come over here? Here, I can sit. She knows what's this.
There, there's a flicker. Yep.
Association, my panelists who joined me today and joined this evening and joined me earlier today.
Could you?
Oh, sure.
Please.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm representing Unshackle Upstate, and I understand as a husband, I'm not a parent yet, my wife and I don't have children, but I am married, the emotional element attached to this issue. And it's not fun to be the voice of opposition to a degree on this issue. But I'm not a pure voice of opposition. We actually have not outright opposed paid leave. We think what the governor proposed is a little bit generous, particularly when you think about what everything else employers face in this state. And we've offered what we believe to be constructive suggestions to make paid leave in New York State work for employers without hurting the economy, without hurting job opportunities, without forcing closures and individuals will lose their jobs, while also providing a level of benefit to working families trying to care for a sick relative or a newborn child. Unshackle Upstate generally focuses on 5 main areas: lower taxes, responsible spending, fewer mandates, less debt, and we try to focus political and economic concentration on upstate New York. When you think about doing business in New York State, this is what employers have to deal with. And no issue can be looked at in a vacuum. You have to understand everything else that exists in the space that they're trying to create a successful business and provide opportunities for individuals in our communities. We have the second highest property taxes. I'm not going to read the whole list, you can see it. Workers' compensation costs, energy costs, gas taxes. These are what we talk about when we say New York State is so uncompetitive versus other states and in an increasingly global economy. The Tax Foundation has said New York State has the highest state and local tax burden in the country. They've also rated our business climate as second worst in the country. CNBC has rated the cost of doing business in New York as 44th in the country. And Site Selection Magazine, which is a trade magazine for organizations looking to move to different states, has again ranked us similarly bad in many important categories. Just this past, about 3 weeks ago now, the Department of Labor released a report saying, or a correction to a report, indicating that upstate New York has actually lost jobs in the past year. It's the first time in 4 or 5 years that's happened. Many of those came out of Rochester. And this is what we still continue to deal with when we talk about the economic stagnation of upstate New York. While some people say, but our unemployment rate is so low now, this slide really underscores why that is. Since the Great Recession, our labor participation rate, our labor force, you see across the state, has really declined. That means less people are looking for work, more people have moved out of the state. So the unemployment rate isn't always a great indicator of the larger economy. So now we get to the paid leave proposal. And Blue did a great job of describing the governor's proposal. I don't think I have anything different here. So you understand the governor's proposal, and that's really what I'm speaking to. In Albany, there's always 3 different entities that propose things, but when you're the governor of New York, yours is the most important. There's sort of a myth out there that this is not been perpetrated by my co-panelists we talked about today, that because this is being paid for an employee checkoff, or this is being being paid for by a deduction from their paycheck, that there is no financial impact on a business. And that's simply not true. When an employee could theoretically leave for 12 weeks, there are very real costs associated with replacing that employee, training a new employee, having other workers cover overtime costs, a general loss of productivity. There are a number of things that will cost employers money. That's what a mandate from New York State does, too often. And again, you have to look at it in consideration of all those other things I spoke about earlier. Small businesses will be even more acutely affected. Oftentimes in a small business, you may only have one person who handles accounting. You may only have one person who handles your HR. So losing that person for 12 weeks will certainly have an impact on your bottom line and how you operate your business. So addressing the concerns, how do we think and how have we suggested to improve this proposal? One's the length of benefit. The governor's proposed 12 weeks. Other states that have done this, California, Rhode Island, New Jersey, their length of benefit is between 4 and 6 weeks. We think that's a more appropriate place to start for New York as we begin to understand what this will do for businesses and how employers will react. Second is the start of eligibility. You would only have to work for an employer for 4 weeks before becoming eligible for this benefit. So you could theoretically work for 4 weeks, then take 12 weeks off to take advantage of the benefit. We think a longer period of 6 months or a year is more appropriate. We'd like small business considerations, as I mentioned before, and understanding that small businesses face unique challenges with this mandate, and whether it's tax relief or some sort of carve-out for micro businesses, we think that should be part of the discussion. We'd also like to see other forms of paid time off that are offered to employees, whether it's vacation time or sick time, be incorporated into the leave package so they can't be used consecutively to lengthen the time off. And fifth, we'd like to see taxpayers and employers protected. So in the future, should this, the way the program is set up now, with an employee deduction that will be determined by the Department of Financial Services, if that deduction is not enough to cover the system in the future, whatever that system may end up being, that there be language in the final proposal so that those costs aren't shifted to employers or to taxpayers. So those are our concerns. Again, we are not outright objecting or opposing this proposal. We just think there should be additional considerations, understanding that without jobs for people to work at, there will be there's no paid leave without an employer providing a job in the first place. And we need to do everything we can to strengthen our economy and continue to try to create jobs, particularly in upstate New York, stem the brain drain, reverse the tide of out-migration. These are all things that have proven to be real challenges for our community, and another state mandate that does add costs and burdens onto employers certainly doesn't improve our ability to grow economically. So we think some of these proposals are reasonable and should certainly be part of the conversation that's going on in Albany. Thank you.
Larry, it's your turn.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Larry Marks. I'm Executive Director of the Children's Agenda. We're a nonprofit advocacy organization based here in Rochester. We've been around for 13 years. Our mission is to improve the health, education, and well-being of Monroe County's children and youth through advocacy for evidence-based solutions and policy change at the local, state, and federal level. So we accept no government money, entirely privately financed, and we only advocate for those things that are proven to work, proven effective. And we are for the paid family leave for 3 reasons. We think it's a rare opportunity to achieve 3 benefits with just one, with the price of one. The first is that it dramatically will help children whose parents can now take care of them when they need it most. Secondly, it has a dual generation effect. It'll help parents who don't have to sacrifice what's best for their jobs in order to do what's best for their kids. And we would argue that it's good for business in a lot of different ways, in the way that it's been shown in California and it's shown in every other civilized country in the world. Because after all, the United States is one of 3 countries in the world that doesn't provide paid family maternity leave, and one of only 4 countries that doesn't provide paid family leave. We're in the company of Papua New Guinea, Swaziland, and Lesotho in South Africa. Those are the other countries which the United States keeps company with. So in terms of the impact of children, there's huge amounts of scientific evidence that's just mounting, showing about the importance of a parent spending time with a newly adopted or newborn child. Huge evidence showing how critical those first few days, weeks, and months are to the development not only of the child, but also of usually the mother and the parent. First is the attachment and bonding that takes place. There's increased cognitive, physical, social, emotional health that results from that precious time. And it makes sure that kids meet all their developmental milestones. You don't know that they're not meeting, milestones mean for infants things like smiling, holding their heads up. But that's directly connected down the road to things like crawling and walking, fine motor skills, reading and writing, speaking. All of that starts at an incredibly early age, at the point of infancy. 7,000 neural connections are made a second after a child is born. That brain is just firing up, and it needs parents and loving caretakers around them. Breastfeeding is another really important reason. Women who have paid family leave are more likely to breastfeed their children, and are more likely to stick with it over longer periods of time. All the studies, all the research shows that that's critical, again, to cognitive, physical, emotional health. And reduce maternal depression. It's increasingly apparent that, in fact, there's a recent study showing 1 out of 10 women are now likely to have maternal depression. It's so much more common than was ever thought, and goes to 3 to 6 months after the birth of a child. So that now it's commonly recommended from the Department of Health and Human Services expert panel that screening for maternal depression should happen before and after a child is born. Paid family leave, especially longer paid family leaves, are shown to dramatically reduce maternal depression. And lastly, chronic stress. We all, as parents, have these trade-offs. My wife had to do the drop-off and pick-up tonight, so I could do this forum. We all face those kinds of trade-offs and stress, but the point is that for people who are low income or single heads of households, that's chronic, it becomes toxic, and that is absorbed by children in really negative ways and disproportionately hurts low-income kids of single parents. So we think that the reasons for parental leave is really solid for that. Rochester is #1 for female head of household in poverty. 35%, 1 out of every 3 women. Worse than any other comparably sized city. We're #1 in poverty for female heads of households. And the labor force participation that Greg rightly speaks to that's declining all over the United States, particularly rapidly for women. Where isn't it declining? Well, in fact, all other OECD countries, the industrialized countries that make up the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, all those other countries are seeing increasing labor force rate participations. We've dropped from 7th out of 24 to 17th since 2000. So we're now at 17th out of 24 countries. What's been going on in those other countries? A number of them have subsidized childcare for working families. A number of them have adopted new paid family leave policies. The World Economic Forum is suggesting that the United States is so retrograde and behind in creating these trade-offs, particularly for women, that women are opting out of the workforce. And in fact, 1 out of 4 women who need leave but can't get it will either quit after having a child or are let go. So this helps prevent a lot of those trade-offs. It helps support women to move out of poverty, and we would argue that it's also supportive of business. Thanks.
Going to share with us the views of a business owner.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm also similar to Greg and some of the other panelists. I'm not against paid family leave. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about my personal experience, and then maybe if there's some questions and answers, I could try to lend a voice from the business community. So I'm the CEO of Car Engineering. My father started the company in 1986. I bought him out last year, so he retired. We're celebrating our 30th year in business. We have 50 employees. Mostly male, mostly skilled workers. We obviously have other people that work there. So we offer paid family leave at Car Engineering. So I reviewed this this afternoon with my CFO, but we have a fairly robust insurance plan, and we pay monthly for our employees to be able to take paid family leave if they want it. So for a guy making 30 grand a year, it's about 10 bucks a month. A guy making 70 grand a year, it's about 25 bucks a month. So we're paying that right now. And I think one of the reasons as a business owner that I sometimes feel frustrated when they put in these mandates is, you know, we're doing the right thing. We're paying. I am a mother. I have 2 children. They're 5 and 2. I breastfed both of my daughters until they were about a year old. I called it the milker, but I brought the pump thing to work and I pumped it up and they got their breast milk. And so I guess I reject, you know, that you've got to have 12 weeks in order to breastfeed your baby. New York State is 6 weeks if it's a regular birth, 8 if it's a C-section. Both my daughters, I took 6 weeks, and then I took a week vacation. So I was off for 7 weeks both times, and you know, they're doing well, I think. So I listened to the show with Evan Dawson today, and I think the biggest thing is I would be more in favor of some kind of federal mandate. Because I think so. You got Car Engineering, you know, we're $9 million in sales, we're coughing $200,000 and, you know, insurance, and, you know, maybe then you've got Burger. I don't want to say any company that maybe isn't doing the right thing, but so then you've got your companies doing the right thing and your companies maybe not doing the right thing, and so then it makes us more uncompetitive with the company that's, you know, doing the wrong thing, and so if you were to put in, you know, a federal mandate where then I think that would be a better approach. And then I guess my final thought is I see this a little bit as a tax on the poor and the working class, right? So it's just going to be, what is it, $1.60? Is that the proposal per week?
Between $1.20 and $1.40.
Okay, so let's call it $1.20 a week.
Less than coffee.
Right, but I mean, coffee's expensive if you go to Starbucks. So I just reject that argument. You know, I'm a very liberal person politically, and this is another kind of tax on the poor and the working class. So maybe the oil companies could pay for it, or the Wall Street could pay for it. You know, I don't know if it's necessarily the right approach to put a tax on my guys, you know, who are making, you know, some make up to $30 an hour, but, you know, a lot of them are you know, working class people, and it's just one more tax, and $4 or $5 a month, that's their lunch, you know, that's real money. So I'm for it, but I do have some concerns, and I'm happy to, you know, share my personal experience. Thank you.